Okay. So good morning and welcome to the CDTC Community Planner Forum. I'm Jen Saponis here at CDTC. I do want to apologize. I know in December we had a little bit of a Microsoft / Outlook snafu, and I logged on for the meeting and thought everyone was joining me, and it turned out that the calendar invite never went out because of one bad email address in the batch. So I was very confused as to where everyone was, and it turned out you didn't know that there was a meeting. So we will be rescheduling Joe Stephen Graves to do the presentation he had planned on doing then at a future meeting. So I do apologize. We did intend to have a December meeting, but I'm glad you're here today. So if you are joining us online, this is a hybrid meeting. So there are people here in the CDTC conference room and there are people on the Zoom. If you are on the Zoom and you're not speaking, please keep your microphone muted. And you don't have to use your camera, but we do love to see you, especially when you introduce yourself. And then if you have any questions during the presentation or during the meeting, if you could raise your hand or put it in the chat, Rima will be monitoring the chat and will let me know if there's a question. Thank you, Rima. Or you can raise your hand and we'll unmute and then unmute your microphone and talk. And also, we're not live streaming our community planner forum to YouTube, but we are recording it and we will put it on YouTube later for anyone who is unable to join us today. So we'll start with introductions. I'm going to start with folks around the table and then I'll have everyone online introduce themselves. So we'll start with Chaim.
I'm Chaim Simon. I'm a transportation planner here at CDTC.
Linda Bonnerheader, principal planner in Rensselaer County.
Hi, I'm Lauren Axford. I'm the open space coordinator for the town of Bethlehem Farms and Forest Conservation Program.
Rob Leslie, Director of Planning for the town of Bethlehem.
Fredo Smith, planner for Lieutenant Greenbush.
Anna Buffon, Director of Planning and Zoning, Town of Greenbush.
Is it one of CDTC?
I'm Steven Maples, also CDTC, I'm our public outreach specialist.
Teresa LaSalle with CDTC.
Rebecca Odell, CDTC.
Mohammed Ibrahim at CDTC.
Great. And now I'm just gonna call your first name from the Zoom and ask you to unmute and introduce yourself. Austin. All right, we'll get back to Austin later. Todd.
Hi, Todd Fabozzi, Director of Sustainability, CDRPC.
Liz.
Liz Cormos, trustee, Village of Ballston Spa.
Ryan.
Ryan Riper, Director of Planning and Engineering in Town of Wilton.
Audrey.
Audrey Bernison, New York State Department of Transportation, Region 1 Planning Unit.
Catherine.
Catherine Lawson, Associate Professor in the Geography and Planning Department and Director of the Albany Visualization and Informatics Lab.
Chris. Chris.
Hi, good morning. Chris Bauer, CDTC staff.
Gloria.
Gloria Heisinger, Town of Malta Planner.
Kathleen.
Kathleen Bell, EPA Region 2 Environmental Public Health Coordinator.
Kim.
Kim Lambert, Community Development and Planning Specialist from Saratoga County Planning Department.
Mayor May. Okay. And then we'll just go back. Austin, are you with us? Okay. All right, so we have a pretty full agenda today. We're gonna have a presentation from the town of Bethlehem. And then Mark Castiglione from CDRBC will be joining us to give us some census updates. And then we also have an update on the urban area boundary that Teresa will walk us through. There are a number of CDRBC planning updates as well as planning updates here that we'll discuss, training and workshop announcements, and then other updates. If other folks have anything to share, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, I'm actually gonna pass it off to Rob. I'm gonna figure out. Okay. Rob, do you want to take over here? Do you
I
want
was
me to
thinking
just
that.
walk?
It'd be easier for me to move to the slide if I sat there.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. Happy to be here to share Bethlehem's experience with open space conservation in our town. This morning, I'll be talking to you about several of the tools that we use for open space conservation in Bethlehem, and hopefully you can come away with some information on how you might be able to apply it to your municipality. With me is Lauren Axford, our open space coordinator. Lauren and I are always available should you have any questions at the end or going forward. Happy to talk to you about how we've implemented our program and any issues we've come across and solutions we've established for our program. So Bethlehem, down.
Might have to use that and push. No, I
Yeah.
use this mouse to,
Okay.
sorry.
There we go. Okay, so Bethlehem, New York, just to get everybody familiar, we are located just south of the city of Albany. We have about a population of 35,000 people as of the last census, 10 miles of Hudson River waterfront. And from a development standpoint, Bethlehem is mainly developed in our central portion of the town, the Delmar area, Slingerlands, Glenmont, somewhat around, Route 9W and Fruitbridge Road. So the central portion of our town, over by the Delmar bypass, and growth is occurring in a southerly direction. So that's where our most development pressure is occurring in a southerly direction. And so essentially our lands that are currently undeveloped in the southern part of town, and to some extent in the western part of town, are areas of interest where our residents and town government are interested in seeing conservation opportunities with willing landowners. Willing landowners is a key aspect of our open space program, in that, the town is looking to work with willing landowners who also have conservation interests in mind. And so our focus for our farms and forest program is mainly in the southern part of town where we still have lands that are undeveloped. So conservation of open space has long been discussed in Bethlehem. I've been with the town for close to 16 years now. It's been a topic of conversation throughout my tenure with the town, starting with the 2005 comprehensive plan and moving ahead to our recent comprehensive plan update just this past summer that was adopted. Open space protection, conservation is on the forefront of residents' minds. And it's been on the forefront of residents' minds through several practices and initiatives, whether it's the open space opinion survey that we conducted in 2018, whether it's the open space plan developed, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as numerous other studies. Open space conservation has always been a topic of interest in Bethlehem. And only until we started to implement what we're calling our Farms and Forest Conservation Program and the establishment of a open space coordinator position in Bethlehem, have we really started to see a success of lands being conserved. And so with the open space coordinator position that Lauren currently holds right now, we've had a lot of success in working with landowners, because you need somebody, to have what we call boots on the ground. You need somebody to be working with landowners, and that being their main position. Prior to, I think, 2015 or so, where we didn't have that open space coordinator position, it was, that role was between planning staff members, maybe it was our volunteer conservation committee, but it really didn't have its own focus on an individual. And with a open space coordinator, again, we've really seen success through that measure. So one of the takeaways I hope you take from this effort is both having residents interested, residents supporting the open space efforts, but also having somebody as a town staff person moving ahead the initiatives that are founded in our comprehensive plan and other open space plans. And so some of the experiences we've had through our open space program, the Farms and Forests program, we've had a lot of education and community engagement. Our scenic photo survey asked residents to take pictures of the town. What areas in town are you interested in seeing conserved? Of course, working with willing landowners. And we got, I think, over hundreds of photos from town residents who went around town, took pictures of their favorite spots, their favorite view sheds. That gave us a great opportunity to have pictures like this to put into presentations, but it also gave us an opportunity to market the program through social media, and then also get a sense of geographically where are folks, what are folks interested in. Moving away from some of the mapping exercises of natural resource inventory, this is really just a basic show us where you are, show us what you like, show us how where you need to see land conserved. And so that was a good quick exercise. I think it lasted maybe a month or two, and we got a lot of great responses as are seen from some of the photos here. We then took these photos and placed them into GIS so that we kind of were able to get a geographic representation of where these areas are located in our town. And so it was a pretty straightforward effort, not a lot of technical resources needed. And we were able to do that in-house with town staff as well. We conducted an opinion survey, set up some pop-up tents at various town events, the farmers market, the town library. Quick QR code, folks can easily grab a survey on their phone and answer questions about types of open space areas to conserve, locations. And we had over a 2-month period, 1,500 responses, multiple choice questions, so they're pretty easy. And folks were readily available to fill out that survey. Again, confirming that protection of open space and farmland in town is relevant, is of interest, and it really helped us as we went ahead to promote open space planning in Bethlehem. Those maybe who might be naysayers opposing open space conservation, this was a great opportunity to provide some information back saying the community is still interested and they have interest in protecting lands in town. We also held two educational series. We called these our conservation stories, and the open space coordinator coordinated with other land conservancies, holding 2 events. One was at the Five Rivers Environmental Education Center. This was in 2019, so it was all pre-pandemic type setup, all in-person meetings. And the first series was on forests and preserves and how land conservation organizations work to conserve land. And it was really just an opportunity for those landowners and conservation entities to tell their story. What opportunities are out there? Landowners were able to share their experiences, how long it took, the paperwork. Really is a great opportunity to learn from those who have been involved. Also another opportunity for vendors to provide local food at these events. Standing room only in both these events. The forest one was standing room only, and then the next series was a few months later, and this was held at Indian Ladder Farms, also standing room only at Indian Ladder Farms, learning more about agricultural opportunities for conservation. And we included ag and markets, New York Farm Bureau, American Farmland Trust, and farm owners who participate in those types of programs, whether they sold their development rights to a conservation organization. They again share their experience, and really a lot of this educational efforts through the opinion survey, the scenic photo survey, was really just to keep open space on the minds of town residents, and to continue to hear that they support the town pursuing these efforts. So a lot of background work has gone on over the past, I'd say 10 years, to keep open space at the forefront of everyone's mind. From the planning side of things, we've developed an open space plan that identified open space criteria that we can use to evaluate the open space conservation value of properties. somewhat of similar to a natural resource inventory where we documented all the natural resources in town, wetlands, forested areas, significant biodiversity areas, grouped all that together into several conservation value maps. And then using our conservation criteria, we evaluated properties in town that were 5 acres or more and of a vacant status. Vacant status was they're either, essentially undeveloped. It could be farmland, it could be forest land, but it was not developed, but it was greater than 5 acres. And so everything you see here on this map represents that criteria with a analysis of the conservation values. And so the darker blue parcels here have a significant value, and the lighter blue, almost like a baby blue, is the moderate value. And so we use this essentially to evaluate opportunities. So should we have 2 landowners who might be looking to sell their land to the town, one of the decision-making measures here is, well, how does it rate in our conservation criteria? And so those in dark blue are significant, those in light blue are the moderate. And so it's just a helpful decision-making tool. It's not the final answer that we use to make, but it helps to inform our decision on several of our conservation opportunities. And so 2 of the tools that we initially had available to us was the Parkland Set-Aside Fund. We were using town parkland money to buy land. And then we were also establishing a term conservation easement program. And so the term conservation easement program is a bit unique to Bethlehem. We are one of, I think one of 4 or 5 towns in municipalities in the state that have the legal right to do this. And so essentially, we needed to obtain special state legislature approval to operate a term conservation easement program. There's a real property tax law 491 that we had to abide by, but we had to also request state legislature approval to do so. We did that by our local representatives at the time, Fahey and Breslin, and that measure was passed by the state legislature. Once that was approved by the state legislature, the town then had to create its own program, the conservation easement exemption program. And this allows landowners who are interested in conserving their land for a period of time. Some folks may have heard about a term conservation easement. That's exactly what this is. It's a period of time where, for a minimum of 15 years, a landowner forgoes development of their property, and in exchange, the town will reduce the total assessed value of that property by 50%. If you increase the term of that easement to 30 years, it'll be a 75% exemption on the assessed value. 50 years, 85% exemption, and then perpetual 90% exemption. The challenge here is getting all the taxing jurisdictions to support such a program. And it was a bit of a challenge for Bethlehem. We essentially had 2 rounds of requests to the Bethlehem Central School District before they eventually approved the school district taxes complying with this formula here. Albany County legislature was not an easy approval either. I think it approved by maybe a handful of votes. And so the school districts are really the key, because if you look at your property tax bill in Bethlehem, 70% of your property tax bill is school taxes. So that's really where a landowner is going to get the most, obviously, right, financial incentive to participate in a conservation easement. And so we have 3 school districts in our town. Bethlehem has opted in. Ravine and Queen School District has not opted in. We started the conversation with them right when the pandemic hit, and then it kind of, I wouldn't say it fell apart, but we haven't really pursued it. It's on our list to pursue. Guildland School District, we don't have much of a large land area in this Guildland School District. And so we're kind of waiting for Guildland, the town itself, to pursue the school district. Guildland recently received that special state legislation. I think they have 1 approval there for their conservation easement, but the school district taxes are not applicable. So we're kind of waiting for Guildland to go at it, and then we'll kind of piggyback on their efforts. And we've told them we're happy to help, support the letters of support experiences with our program as they move ahead with the Guildland opt-in. And I believe Albany County has also not approved the county tax exemption for Guildland. So that's another issue that Guildland is dealing with. But from a Bethlehem standpoint, we in order to implement this program, we had to establish a conservation easement review board. different than a conservation advisory committee. So those of you also who are familiar with, conservation planning, the Conservation Easement Review Board here is specific to operating the Conservation Easement Exemptions Program. There's a 5-member board. Lauren's position staffs that board, accepts applications, works with landowners to complete the applications, and then provides an assessment to the board as they consider making a recommendation to the town board. But there is a formal process set up in our local law to hold public hearings, and ultimately the town board needs to make that final approval. Over the past, I think maybe 8 years or so, we've had 6 participants in the conservation easement program, protecting over 150 acres of land. We have heard from some rural landowners in our southern part of town. Having ravine claimants not participate in the program is certainly not a benefit to them. And so, some of them are waiting to see how that goes. We might see more interest from landowners in the southern part of town if the school district was to participate. Our Parkland Set-Aside Fund has also been a tool we've been using for conservation of open space. All municipalities have the opportunity to provide or charge a Parkland Set-Aside fee for residential properties. New York state law allows towns to collect parkland fees associated with residential development. You can establish those fees to single-family homes, single-family attached units, multifamily, and most recently in 2019, the town increased our single-family rate to $2,200 per unit for new residential developments. And so as somebody builds a new home in a residential subdivision, they pay that fee as part of their building permit. That goes into a Parkland Set-Aside Fund, and the town can use those funds for parkland improvements, studies on parks, but also for parkland purchase. And so recently there's been that interest in using the Parkland Set-Aside Fund for parkland purchase. Examples of that have been along the Bloemenkill adjacent to Henry Hudson Park. So here's our town of Bethlehem here. Henry Hudson Park is located along the Hudson River in our eastern part of town, southeastern part of town. This was a project where we purchased 20 acres of property from two landowners, the Bagel land on the Henry Hudson Park side of the Bloemenkill, and then the Downs land, another 10 acres on the opposite side of the Bloemenkill. We work with our local Mohawk Hudson Land Conservancy, as well as Scenic Hudson, to complete this project. Mohawk Hudson provided technical resources to do this, and Scenic Hudson provided funding. And so through the town's parkland funds, the Scenic Hudson funding, and Mohawk Hudson's technical resources, we were able to purchase these 20 acres of land to expand Henry Hudson Park. So site visits occurred on the property as we were buying the land to understand its importance, both from a natural standpoint, but also from a parkland standpoint. The town now owns additional portions of the Bloemenkill for our kayak tours and kayaking opportunities. I think a few years ago, a boat launch was installed here for kayaks up and down the Bloemenkill. This here is our Bloemenkill Falls. In the spring, you can see here, it's quite attractive and a nice destination for folks who are coming from this kayak launch here. Another example of using our parkland set-aside funds is the Normanskill Ravines. In I think it was 2021, the town purchased 68 acres from the nearby country club. This is forested land, more of a slopey, terrain ravine area along the Normanskill, and it expanded an existing 85 acres the town owned into what is now a 147 acre, what we're calling a kind of a nature park, walking trails. We're looking to develop biking trails. Those efforts are underway, and it's located just under a mile away from the Albany County Rail Trail. To orient you folks who are familiar with this area of town, our Four Corners area is here, and the Albany County Rail Trail runs through that Four Corners area in Delmar, and this new park is located just north of that area. So a great opportunity for a park in a developed area of our town. A couple interesting pieces of information with this property. As you buy property and get into looking at it, evaluating it, you come to learn that there might be easements on a property or leases on a property. This was in a case where there was a previous hunting lease allowed that was given to the the members of a Salisbury Road Deer Management Group. And so there's a 10-year lease in place on this piece of property. And so the town had a decision at that time. Do we buy the property knowing that there's 10 years of hunting going on during that October deer hunting season? Or do we walk away from it, recognizing the value of this property and expanding this land for a town park? The town obviously saw the benefit for future generations and decided to work around that issue. And so we had to amend our hunting law in town. Chapter 79 of our town code is a hunting code. It prohibits hunting on town parks, but we had to amend our law to allow hunting only in instances where there are previous leases in place that were in place. And once those leases extinguished, they're obviously not going to be extended. And through that process, we learned that several other preserves through Long Hudson or the Nature Conservancy have hunting allowed on their property. I think Thatcher Park, State Park even has hunting allowed on that property. So we did have to have a conversation with the community to inform them that this isn't something so unique for the town to be involved in. It will extinguish over a 10-year period, and folks saw the benefit of the long-term benefit of preserving this land and turning it into a park. So two opportunities or two tools we were using, as I mentioned, the conservation easement program and parkland set-aside funds. But we didn't have that. One of the issues we came across was that we didn't have that annual funding mechanism in place to advance open space opportunities. And so we were looking for opportunities to have a dedicated town fund that can help to purchase agricultural easements or agricultural land. The parkland, just so you know, the parkland set-aside fund can only be used for parkland. So the town can't buy agricultural land and then just have it used for agriculture. If you buy parkland, it has to be used for parkland only. And so there was that gap in our program to really understand, preserving farmland. And so we came up with a Farms and Forest Fund. And so with the help of our town comptroller, and so you'll learn as one of the experiences we've learned as we develop this program is we really have to tap all the resources in our town government to help, advance a program. And so our town comptroller was key in identifying an opportunity where we could create a Farms and Forest Fund through our, what's known as our Capital Reserve Fund. And so our Farms and Forest Fund was established to purchase land and agricultural easements. We can use portions of this fund to leverage other state and federal programming. It can pay for transaction costs. As you get into buying land, you need to, take care of appraisals and title searches and land surveys. These monies can be used for those types of activities, all associated with conservation in your town. And so through our comptroller, we learned that we can use our existing capital reserve fund to essentially earmark money towards open space conservation. And so essentially in a short description of this, what happens is each year in our town at the end of our fiscal year, which is the calendar year, should there be a surplus at the end of the year, and the surplus in Bethlehem is caused either by unexpected increase in sales tax, unexpected sales taxes, greater than expected sales tax, mortgage recording tax, or perhaps we've seen retirements and we're not replacing staff members. All that additional funding goes into what's known as the Capital Reserve Fund. And so we essentially are using surplus at the end of each year to filter that into a capital reserve fund. And so our comptroller came up with a formula here that essentially says that funding goes into a Farms and Forest Fund. It's triggered when the year-end unassigned fund balance is in excess of 21% of the budget. And this formula here represents that, essentially that statement. And so at the end of 2021, town staff, as well as members of the public, were surprised to learn that we had 2 million that was moved into that Farms and Forest Fund. That came at a important time because we also had a landowner who was interested in conserving the land and selling to the town 300 acres of property. And so that's where folks have been paying attention to Bethlehem, where we've been in the news in the past election cycle in 2022. We had this Milltown Plaza Farmland Preservation Project. And so you might have seen articles in the Times Union, or maybe it came up on your social media feed, but preserving the Milltown Plaza, otherwise known as Proposition 2. You might have seen signs, vote yes for Prop 2, or maybe vote no for Prop 2, with the, I would say the benefit of having a landowner willing to sell land and the town having funds available. We pursued this farmland preservation project. of over 300 acres of property. Again, in our southern area of the town, you can see here, Route 9W is running north to south here. And then the Interstate 87, the Northway, just next to it, 300 acres here of undeveloped land. And you can see the encroachment of development to the from the west here. You can see these subdivision streets here. So development is occurring in that southwest direction. These lands became open for opportunity for purchase, and the town worked with the landowner to purchase those properties. It was not a straightforward process. As much as, you know, I talk about all the history of going through the opinion surveys and the scenic photo surveys and the educational opportunities, there was some opposition to the town's purchase. And so using a capital reserve fund to buy land, anytime you use a capital reserve fund, it's subject to what's known as permissive referendum. And so what that means is residents in any town or municipality can get together and file a petition with so many signatures. Essentially that petition says, we feel the voters of the town should be voting on this measure for this use of this funds, and we want to see this go to a vote in November. Those signatures were obtained by a opposition group. I think 800 signatures was the target they needed to achieve. They did achieve that, and it forced a vote on the November election ballot. And so with that, Proposition 2 was placed on the ballot. It was approved. So 61% of voters at that election approved the town's purchase of the land using the Farms and Forest Fund. However, it certainly came with all the promotional of support and opposition that we have all become accustomed to in our elections, you know, over the last election cycle. So there was a strong push to vote yes, and there was also a push to vote no. There were both sides campaigning and marketing to town residents for, you know, support and for opposition. But ultimately, the vote was a yes, and the town has recently closed on the property as of this past month. We now own it. Lauren's, you know, one of Lauren's main tasks right now over the past few months is really kind of getting out there and getting a better understanding of what we want to do with the property. The first goal of purchasing the property and conserving it has been achieved, right? We bought the land. We know development is not going to happen on it. The next goal is how do we manage it, right? Do we sell it to a landowner after we put a agricultural easement in place? Do we lease it to an agricultural landowner? Do we restore the barn that's on the property? So Lauren is investigating all those options, and we'll be, you know, working with the town board to, you know, establish a plan and then establish, you know, next steps for that, you know, for the property. But ultimately, the goal of protection has been achieved. Town owns it. No development will happen on, you know, on the property. So we'll see these fields remain in place. With that, I hope I stayed within my 20 minutes. A lot of information I wanted to share. Happy to answer any questions now, or obviously, as you take this back to your communities, glad to talk further if issues come up. Yeah.
Have you worked with your land conservancy on getting state funding, the agricultural protection funding?
Yeah, we've explored that.
Okay.
Yeah, we have explored that. We've worked with Ag and Markets on that, learned more about that program. It's not a streamlined program.
It's not streamlined. I mean,
Yeah.
we've served, I think, over 1,000 around
Oh,
the
wow.
county.
Great.
So it's
Yeah.
like, it's something you definitely should be working with them
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
Because it's like you have a lot of the background, and things
Right.
like that, and it looks like you have good soil, so it really looks like you should be able to use the PDR program
Yeah.
pretty nicely. And you're probably too new, but have you run into anybody who's reneged and all of a sudden they signed up for the protection thing and then developed their property? Have you ever run
We
into that
have,
yet?
we have run into an issue where a conservation easement was approved on a piece of property.
Yep.
And the landowner has had second thoughts. Yeah. And so we're figuring out what the issues were. There's a process in place in our conservation easement program where the owner has to petition the town board to amend it. But there's a strong bar that has to be achieved to amend it. And if it is amended, the property owner has to pay back the past foregone taxes plus a penalty. There's like a multiplier on top of that. So That has not really moved forward. The Conservation Easement Review Board has heard about the case. The landowner has presented to the board, but no decisions have been made.
And it's
Yeah.
a good thing that actually you've got a good community where nobody's gonna be able to get the subdivision or whatever, and without getting past you, which already knows about it. So
Right.
unlike, it's like with like a county size type of thing, it might be subdivision would go in and we wouldn't know, not necessarily know sort of thing.
Yeah, what we do is planning department, who is obviously involved in this program, we work with our building department who
Yep.
handles all the building permits. We have an internal software program that it's basically a land management system.
Yep.
And we flag parcels. I don't mean flag in a bad way, I mean
Yeah.
we flag parcels so that should somebody come in for a building permit on a parcel.
Yep.
There's information in that parcel system that says, hey, this has a conservation easement on it, talk to plan.
Yep.
So that's, it's a way of,
Yeah.
if I'm gone, Lauren's gone, somebody else is gone, the system has it in place so that, folks, it lasts long after we're gone.
Yeah.
So
Just-
Catherine Lawson on the video has a question or two. Catherine, do you want to just unmute yourself and ask, or I could read off your question if you'd prefer? She asks, are you integrating with your hazard mitigation planning strategies for open space needs?
Hazard mitigation related to climate change and issues related to that. Is that what the question is related to?
I'm not really sure.
I think probably
Yeah.
things like resiliency and stuff.
That's not actually not one of the criteria we have. It's a good point. It's not one of the criteria we have in our conservation assessment. Although we do have areas in that conservation assessment that allow us to add new issues that may not have been, at the forefront at the time. So one example is we include, historic structures or historic assessments that are not specifically in the criteria, but it gives us an opportunity to include it in the evaluation. So something we can certainly add. That's a good point. We can certainly add as we look to modify the program, every few years. One thing I do want to mention to the group is the conservation easement exemption program. It should, in my opinion, from professionally and operating it, this is a program that should be available to every municipality. I don't see any reason why we or Gilliland need special state legislation to operate such a program. And so I make this statement to anyone that can, have listening to me. It should be a across the board opportunity for any municipality. Develop your program and then get, state, then get school districts or, the counties involved to opt into those programs. But having each municipality go to the state to allow this program, to me seems, inefficient. And at a time where the state is promoting, addressing issues with climate change and conserving land, every municipality in the state should have an opportunity to implement the program without state legislation. So just my soapbox pitch to everyone here today.
Rob, you might have covered this earlier in your presentation, but can give us a sense of how much acreage of agricultural land is active in the town?
Yeah, we have that information. I don't have it off the top of my head. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I will say it is decreasing, as development occurs. So we're no different than any other, town. We're fighting that challenge of development and conserving land. So
yeah. Do you have a sense of how much acreage you have that's opted into the state ag district?
Yeah, I don't have that number as well. I mean, I would say maybe it's close to 1,000 acres or so. I think that's probably ballpark. Yeah, I would say that's a safe bet. Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, so what, I mean, all of this sounds fantastic and amazing. And, if you're on board with open spaces and everything, but clearly there was an organized opposition. What was the nature of that opposition? Where was it stemming from? What was the kind of?
I think the opposition was stemming from essentially a difference in policy right?
Mhm.
And I think the difference in policy is that, what I'll characterize as the large landowner community or the farming community
Mhm.
is essentially opposed to town government purchasing land, and managing land. And, you know, their message to the town board at the time was, we're okay with the town buying development rights, but the town has no business in buying land and managing the land. So they were essentially kind of creating a line of, we're okay with you if you were to buy development rights and put an ag easement on the property and have a landowner continue to own and maintain the property. We're not okay with the town. We don't believe the town should be in the position of buying land and managing land. And with that kind of, you know, dividing line,
Mhm.
that's where their opposition came from.
So it was really about the ownership is the stumbling block that they.
Well, I'm wondering, knowing the farmers in Rensselaer County, there were some of them, they were probably eyeing it to buy it themselves maybe, and, you know, the town took them out of the equation.
Well, also, it's important, I think, to realize too, that the owner that we purchased the land from was a developer who has developed a lot of areas of our town. Was willing to sell it to any willing buyer, but not at a price that was affordable to any of our local farmers. And in fact, the resident farmer who has been leasing that land for a long time was very interested in buying it, but because he was looking at a fair market value, it did not reflect the agricultural value, rather the development potential. It was just not possible. So the town came in sort of as a, you know, interim solution to that, so that we can get the land back into the hand of farmers at an affordable price.
So if it all goes right and you play the game right, you might have more farmers interested in the program. Because if they find that, yes, okay, this is preserved now, and it came out good, and we now have this property, they may actually be more willing to play with guys.
Right, so the success of this one example can resonate to other opportunities and having funds available. I mean, that is key, you know. So the history of getting to where we are today with constantly, you know, hearing about the interest and open space planning being in all our comp plans and updates and everything else, but then also having the tools in place and a funding source was key, so that we were ready when the opportunity became available.
But definitely look into it can't be you guys applying for the state program, it has to be a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
So the land trust, but work with the land trust and it should be coming out now, but figure out what you're, you know, talk to your farmers, they are, you know, they should be talking to the farmers saying, okay, anybody interested to, you know, have purchase development rights, because, I mean, they get a chunk of change or whatever, if they want to protect it.
Yeah.
Takes the burden off of you guys a little bit, but.
Right.
I think it is important, as well as Rob mentioned, having a staff person to coordinate and, you know, to advance the program. A big part of my role I see is developing relationships with our farmers. Because, and that's sort of a long game, but it's a very helpful, and I think to, you know, to have the program be more well received. That's really important. It's just that, you know, the relationship building.
Yeah, that's tough sometimes.
Yeah.
So I have a question, but before I jump in, Todd has patiently had his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Great presentation. I think this is a great model. I very much was thinking the same thing and agree with you about this should be available to everyone. Just curious, and if I missed this, I apologize, but in your evaluation of the parcels and your prioritization mapping, was there a debate around the idea of actually downzoning those areas so that there was less development potential in them? And just curious about that. And I know that if there was or there wasn't, I can imagine the pushback on that, but I'm just curious.
Right. Yeah, so that debate did not come through as we were developing the, well, let me step back. As we were developing the criteria and we ran essentially the model of the you know, the land significance, there was a clear, it was clear to us from the community that we shouldn't be using these parcels in a regulatory manner. And I think in that map I showed, if you zoom in, when you look at the presentation, there's a disclaimer on that map that says this, you know, these parcels or this map is not to be used in a regulatory purpose. It then moved forward to our comprehensive plan update this past year, where there were individuals in a group in town that were looking to say, hey, look, these properties are obviously of a priority to us. Let's go ahead and downzone them. And there was a strong, as you can imagine, Todd, there was a strong pushback from, large landowners and others in the community to say, hey, that's not the right way to operate an open space program. If the town, wants to preserve open space, the sentiment or the quote that came out of the large landowners was the town shouldn't put their open space program on the backs of large landowners. If the town wants to conserve land, they should work with landowners and buy the land. And so clearly the Milltown Plaza project was exactly what we did. We had funding available and we purchased the land. So I found it interesting that there was that, that statement made about, you want the land, buy it. Here we are buying the land and there was still pushback. So the regulatory discussion did come up. It certainly came up, but the town board was not interested in putting in place zoning that would downzone property to essentially, limit, development on these properties.
Right. I mean, I imagine one of the things you could do is, and I'm sure you're doing this anyway, is just tracking over time the success and whether it's stymieing the erosion of your open space or, and if you can see down the line 10 years from now that you still need some stronger tools, then that may be coming up again.
What we've done in our comprehensive plan essentially is in that southern part of town where this land is still available and growth is occurring, some of that area is somewhat limited to infrastructure. And so our comprehensive plan, does talk about in that rural part of our town, limiting the residential density, but providing for by right agricultural type and agricultural support uses. And so if we're going to, modify the residential density to a lower density, we're also looking to provide other options for landowners to develop their property. But it'll look to also retain that rural character and value. And so that might be one way of maybe addressing the regulatory issue without essentially downzoning properties.
Right. And just one last comment. I suspect that the pushback on the town actually owning it is more about the theory of expanding government or keeping government small.
Yeah, I believe so. So it's a policy or philosophical difference. I don't know we ever come to any type of agreement there.
Can we do one last question and then hopefully people can catch up with Rob offline? I know this has been a hot topic and there's a lot of questions about it. Are there any other questions online?
So Mark has his hand up.
Hey, great program. We should work on legislation that makes it across the board. Certainly upstate APA would support it. In terms of maintenance costs and administrative costs, you may have mentioned this. Is that coming out of the forest program tied to your capital fund?
So yeah, the maintenance cost of I'll characterize maintenance costs as essentially kind of Lauren's budget in promoting the program, equipment, appraisals, surveys. We have a portion of the town's general operating budget. So the planning budget has a line item specifically for open space initiatives. And over the past few years, we've funded that in about maybe like $5,000 to $7,000 over the past few years. So that's been enough to kind of get us by with some surveys, appraisals, and that's outside of the use of the Farms and Forest Fund. We can certainly use that, but it's subject to permissive referendum. So we try and avoid some of these minor costs being subject to use of the capital reserve fund.
So like if you had a trail that you wanted to maintain on a property that you now manage, is that just coming out of the general fund or?
Yeah, well, that would come out of the Parks Department, general maintenance funds, right? So if we're maintaining trails, that's coming out of the Parks operating budget for maintenance.
Gotcha, thanks.
Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you, Lauren, and if it's okay with you both, we'll include the presentation in the notes.
Sure.
So folks can take a look, and your contact information, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We do have to get going, so I want to thanks for
Okay.
having us.
Yeah.
Again, happy to answer any questions, email us, send us a phone call.
Yeah.
Happy to help out when we can.
Thanks,
so much.
Travis.
Thanks, have a good one.
So I know we don't always have like a lot of the strict land use topics and presentations here. But you know, we've been working with CDRBC to coordinate different kinds of presentations. And land use obviously is really important to helping us manage the transportation system and investments in our transportation system over time. And there's a lot, you know, we can learn from different communities. So we're definitely gonna try our best to integrate some more land use topics as we can. Okay, so moving on in the agenda to the next item, which is the US Census updates. First, I'm gonna have Teresa walk us through the urban area update. Teresa, I can just move the slides forward if you
Sure.
wanna.
Great. Yep. Okay, so, you know, I spoke about this at maybe one or two previous meetings. So talking about how they were kind of Census Bureau was looking at defining the urban areas, posts from the data from the 2020 census. So those were officially released and designated on December 29th, 2022. Overall, the population in our 4-county region grew, which is, you know, not that common in New York State. So that's good, but just a small amount of growth, and that will help a little bit with funding, but other areas that have grown more, you know, will get more funding. So we did have a small decline in the Albany Schenectady urban area, and we saw growth in our Saratoga Springs urban area. Those are the two largest urban areas within our region. They did not merge. We thought they might based on kind of the methodology and the data source they were using. They were looking at commute data, so we thought they might merge, but they didn't. And then if actually, Jen, if you want to go to the next slide, that we'll talk about kind of the areas of retraction from 2010 on the map. But this just gives you kind of the numbers overall. We see that our metropolitan planning area population did increase slightly, you know, about 2%. The Albany Schenectady urban area decreased slightly, and the Saratoga Springs urban area went up about 15%. And then I just included I don't want to use the term smaller because they've taken away the term large and small urban areas, but we do have some, I guess, minor urban areas in our region. And those, you know, don't really, those don't qualify in funding programs necessarily as urban and rural. So when we're looking at transportation funding, we're mainly talking about Albany, Schenectady, and sometimes the Saratoga Springs area, depending on the funding program. If you want to go to the next slide, we have the map. And I apologize, this is from the Federal Highway map viewer with the official boundaries. And for some reason, they've decided to use a red and a green on the same map, which I know there's at least one person attending this meeting that is red-green colorblind. So what we're looking at on the left map, on the left is the 2020 urban area boundaries designated by the census. The lower polygon is the Albany Schenectady urban area, and the upper polygon within the 4 counties is the Saratoga Springs urban area. If you look at the map on the right, the filled in polygon area, that's the 2010 boundaries. So you can see there that anything that's basically outside of the outline was urban in 2010 and was not defined as urban in 2020. So for our region, you kind of what kind of sticks out on the map is the town of Milton, kind of several areas in the town of Milton, and then kind of along the Rotterdam Glenville border, and then the village of Altamont and some adjacent area around the village of Altamont, which that area definitely became, that area and the areas in Rensselaer County, like western, southwestern Rensselaer County, those were not urban in 2000.
Yeah.
They were pulled in 2010, which were odd.
There were,
Yes.
it was farm fields, there was one
Right.
thing was like, there was nothing on it and they're putting it in the urban area.
Right, and I think that's why they kind of redefined their methodology, the Census Bureau did this time around, because it was definitely bringing in things that, you know, they were defining as urban that weren't really urban. And, you know, when I showed the other
River
slide,
Hall. Yeah.
right, when I showed the other, Hoosick Falls was one of them, and also, even now, Corinth, I mean, it's essentially the village of Corinth. I mean, no, I'm sure no one who knows Corinth thinks of it as an urban area, but it's based on the density of the population.
Hoosick Falls is a
and-
little city in the middle of whatever, but it's like, when you have farm fields and it's like, okay, there's no density in there.
Right. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Jim. So basically, there were some small other changes between 2000 and 2020. So basically, for Albany, Schenectady, it's the only change that's really happened. Back in 2000, it was Albany, Schenectady, Troy was the name. And at that time, they had large urban areas and small urban areas, and it was defined as a large urban area. In 2020, in 2010, the Troy got dropped out of the name. I'm not sure why that was their decision. For Corinth, in 2000, it was not urban. In 2010, it became an urban cluster, which is also a term they don't use anymore. So in 2020, it remains just an urban area. Hoosick Falls was not urban in 2000, became an urban cluster in 2010, and now has been deemed a rural area for 2020. Mechanicville was a small urban area on its own in the 2000 census, merged with the Albany urban area in 2010, and now is its own urban area again. Ravenna, was considered a small urban area in 2000, became an urban cluster in 2010, and in 2020 is an urban area, and they've added Bethlehem to the name. You know, most of the town of Bethlehem is within the Albany, Schenectady urban area. That's one urban area where we do have to coordinate closely with DOT. That urban actually goes into Greene County. And in the past, when we've done our urbanized area boundary update, submitted the federal highway, we've coordinated with DOT so that where the Albany Schenectady urban area boundary and the Ravenna or now Ravenna Bethlehem boundaries meet are contiguous, and you know, everything looks right. And then Saratoga Springs, that really hasn't seen any changes other than in 2000, it was, you know, they use the terminology large urban area. And just have one more slide to talk about the next steps. So basically right now, we're kind of waiting for guidance and resources such as data files, mapping applications and tools from Federal Highway and New York State DOT on adjusting and smoothing the urban areas. So basically, that's an optional exercise. CDTC has gone through it. This will be my third go round of the urban area update. We have opted to do it after every decennial census. But the most important thing to keep in mind here is this does not affect the population that's used for urban areas to determine funding allocation from FHWA and FDA funding programs. That is always going to be that census designated boundary. So mainly this, we've also had a lot of questions. It's really different agencies and funding programs use different definitions of urban and rural. And the Census Bureau always says, you know, they put out the boundaries, they create the boundaries for their own needs. And then other agencies, you know, like Federal Highway use them, but all of their definitions don't necessarily meet with the definitions of the other agencies' urban and rural definitions for their programs. So that's always something to keep in mind, you know, just find out what that program is actually using for urban and rural. So mainly the reason why we go through it as an MPO is, you know, more for planning and transportation planning purposes. So the ability to smooth and adjust the extent of the urban area boundaries where they are irregular is allowed as a tool to avoid inconsistent urban rural road segment functional classifications where roads would switch between urban and rural status many times along their length as a result of raw census delineated urban area boundaries often being irregular in shape. And you can see from the boundaries,
clearly they are irregular in shape. So the importance with roadway functional classification is it can affect federal aid funding eligibility. So, we will collaborate as we have in the past with DOT and federal highway. But our main goal, probably a starting point, will be looking at all the areas that have retracted. So anything that became urban in 2010 and seeing if we can bring those areas back in, because if we don't, we may have to change the functional class. And for most cases, it's not going to affect the federal aid eligibility. It would be more of a, a hassle to change, reclassify all those roads. So that's mainly what we'll be looking at, but we'll look at some other things, like if there's an area that in the past, we pretty much have been able to bring everything back in that was lost by their definition, but also if there's areas that are developed and based on the data they use or the imagery they had wasn't as recent and wasn't really reflected in their data, and we really think it should be included, we'll also bring that in. So basically we have until the end of December to submit any adjustments to federal highway, and that would be after our planning and policy, planning committee and policy board approve a resolution that they agree with the boundary adjustment. And, we've never had any issue with federal highway or DOT accepting the boundary that we've proposed. So, the clock is already ticking. I mean, everything was behind on the census, but they're not giving any extension on when we have to have our urban area boundary back in. So, yeah, this is not a fascinating topic, but definitely, one that probably occurs and people don't even know that it could be impacting them.
And you don't know how important it is until you do, and an MS4 is based on that. And it's like the MS4, when they expanded it out to Barboursville Falls, all of a sudden we added, I don't know how many miles on the MS4 program, and it's like, so, yes.
Yeah, so that's it. I mean, this could affect a lot of other programs that we're not necessarily familiar with because it's outside the realm of our planning. So
Yep.
it is an important, it's
Very
important to
important.
be aware of. I don't, if anyone has any questions, they can ask them now, or, Jen will include my contact information. I'm basically the mind trust of this topic here at CDTC. So,
And as this moves along, we'll obviously update the planner forum.
yep, yeah, we'll give you updates as it's going along, and also, for those involved in our other committees and groups, you'll be seeing updates also.
Thank you, Teresa. Mark, do you want to give an update on the status of the 2020 census results?
Sure. I think if I continue to talk about the census, people are going to start killing themselves. I think we'll be quick. So the census is greatly delayed. The next data release is May 2023. Some of the data that has historically been included in what we call SF1, Summary File 1, will be released in a new file called Demographic and Housing Characteristics. And it remains to be seen whether that will include enough of the data that we would need to proceed with our population projections for the next period looking out. There's also going to be another data release with even more detailed information coming out in August. So that's the census update. We have updated our Capital Region Indicators website with the latest 5-year ACS, the 2017 to 2021 5-year. We have also updated our building permit data on our website. It's under data, housing, and then the building permit data. We have 15 years of building permit data there, and that has been updated through 2021. We have also recently updated our demographic multipliers, and demographic multipliers are generally tells you how many children are generated by a particular housing type. And the big takeaway there is that whether it's a single family home or a multifamily home, the number of children being related to a housing type is continuing to go down, commensurate with the lower household sizes and lower fertility rates that we've been seeing as an overall national trend. In addition, we've updated our producer price index and consumer price indices on our website. The big takeaway there is that producer prices began to decrease in the fall of 2022. And typically consumer prices then follow. It's a lagging or leading indicators, the PPI, and we should see a commensurate decrease in the CPI in Q1 of this year or Q2. So that's good news. Any questions? Oh,
Great, thanks.
one thing we're also trying to look at, and this, we may be talking about this later, is we're planning on doing a case study, hopefully to see how a community in our region would be either in compliance with or out of compliance with the proposed housing compact legislation. I'm not sure if anybody has looked at that, but for communities in upstate New York, the general back of the napkin target for production of housing is 1% over the baseline of housing units established by the 2020 census. There are a number of factors that will be going into that. The legislation contemplates new mandated reporting to the Division of Homes and Community Renewal for New York State. But it seems like they will be using a combination of building permit data and residential occupancy permits to determine how many housing units are coming online in a community against the 2020 baseline. So potentially a topic for a future planners forum as more details come out about that.
Thanks, Mark. Other CDRPC planning updates?
Planning updates, we're still working on broadband. We have engaged our partners in Schenectady and Rensselaer counties and Saratoga County, hopefully to issue an RFP for a build-out analysis. So we have been working very hard to submit challenges to the FCC data about connectivity, address level data and connectivity. So we hope to narrow down the scope of our future inventory / build-out analysis to be able to identify quickly where those infrastructure needs would pay the most dividends and hopefully enable the counties to be positioned for federal funding for broadband build-out. In addition, yesterday, a NOFA from the Economic Development Administration was released. That includes a variety of new funding types for public works and other things that can be loosely associated with economic development. These funds are particularly prioritized for areas of distress. So we will be putting together a map that shows you where those areas of eligibility exist and sharing some of that additional grant information out through our email. So be on the lookout for that.
Got a couple of things to add, if you're done, Mark. So in terms of the work that we're doing with NYSERDA Clean Energy Community Program and the DEC Climate Smart Community Program, which we work on in tandem, we've been working on those contracts for quite a while now. This is our 7th year working with the Clean Energy Community Program, and then we've added on the Climate Smart Community Outreach Coordinators Program last year. And they're basically covering the same areas. So our contract covers 4 regions in New York State, 28 counties. And we have a whole series of different things we're doing with the communities. So I will just kind of summarize instead of going into all the details. There's a number of you around the table that we've worked with, a few that we haven't. And so certainly reach out to us if you're interested in support for clean energy actions or for climate action planning. But just as a quick summary of the kind of stuff we've been doing, as of right now, we're engaged with 71 communities in the capital region on the combination of these 2 programs. And like I said, we typically work on them together and in tandem because they complement and cross over each other in different ways. We have right now been working on government operations inventories for communities. So basically we have a tool in which the community can document their energy usage for their facilities and their fleets and other emitters. And then we right now have completed 20 so far, and we're working on 10. So there's 10 in progress right now. We are then building off of those to do climate action plans. And so we do two different kinds of climate action plans. We'll do a plan for government operations. We've done 5 of those so far, and we have 6 of those in progress right now. And we also do community level inventories and plans, though that's more so on the back burner. So we have 2 right now that we're working on in each of those categories, but those are ones that we require a more full-fledged inventory of the full community energy usage in order to be able to do those. And we did an inventory back in 2012 of our entire region. So we have the greenhouse gas footprint for every community in the region right now, but it needs to be updated. And under the current DEC funding, there's really not enough funding to update the entire region's footprint. But we are currently going to be applying for, and we're working on this now, an EPA grant that will allow us to develop a climate action plan for the whole region and allow us to basically work with all of the different communities and stakeholders that are doing things to reduce their carbon footprint, incorporating those kinds of ideas broadly in this plan so that it makes room for a second round of funding, competitive funding, in order to apply for grants to be able to implement those projects. And we'll be working with communities to do that, to develop those projects and implement those projects. So this would go on over a 4-year period. We'd be partnering with CDTC as well, and we would be developing an entire community greenhouse gas inventory update for the region. So that's underway. 2 last pieces of the Climate Smart Community Program we are doing in the capital region right now are involved in 18 resilience plans, adaptation and resilience plans, which are a little different, as you I'm sure know. They're not mitigation plans to reduce your footprint, but they're adaptation plans to prepare for extreme weather events and other issues related to climate change. And so Albany County's been working on a plan in which we are participating with, and they are about to dovetail into their hazard mitigation plan, which we'll be participating with. And I think that's maybe for Rob, that tie in there that was the question about some of the ways open space can contribute to those, to protecting flooded areas and stormwater. But also are doing 17 of those plans in Columbia County, at the county, and a whole group of communities together as a cohort. So those are the things that are underway with this program. So just stay tuned, because if we we expect to get this EPA grant. It is not competitive, and our region it qualifies for $1 million to do this over the next 4 years. So there'll be a lot of engagement with the communities and stakeholders on this to basically gather your ideas of the things we can do to reduce our carbon footprint.
Thanks, Todd. And Mark put a link to the New York Housing Compact information from the governor's office in the chat, and we'll include that in the notes for today's meeting. Okay.
I would just mention that it's a pretty radical departure of our normal home rule sort of governance structure, because it includes a variety of things that would sidestep local zoning regulations.
Yeah, I think as we see more from this, and like you said, Mark, if CDRBC does a case study, it would be good to have this as like future meeting topics. Okay, so in the interest of time, so CDTC has a bunch of updates, and I will try to get through these relatively quickly. But some of the major things I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of, you probably know that the 2023-2024 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, was adopted at the March Policy Board meeting. This is just kind of a summary of funding and budgets in the UPWP. I starred the safety grant because that is actually a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that CDTC will administer. It's from Federal Highways program that's part of the bill. It will help the region update and really expand on the local road safety action plan that was developed in 2019. It was a joint application that included the cities of Albany, Saratoga Springs, Waterville, Troy, Village of Green Island, and DOT. But it will be a regional effort, so even if your community wasn't a joint applicant, just know that, you know, the safety planning and analysis will occur region-wide, and the whole region will benefit. Some new projects that are in the UPWP, these would be what we had traditionally referred to as linkage projects. For 2023-2024, these new projects are a town center plan update for the town of Milton, the complete streets and connections plan for the village of Castleton on Hudson, an all access complete street visibility study for the village of Voorheesville, a Broadway flood resilient multimodal corridor study for Albany County, the Curry Road and Gilderland Avenue multimodal study in the town of Rotterdam, and Central Avenue West study in the town of Colony. As you can see, it's a real range of project sizes and types, and we do have some new communities that we haven't worked with before, or we haven't worked with in a very long time. So we're really looking forward to getting these projects started. If you are one of these projects, please be on the lookout for a letter and an MOU that needs to get signed and turned around back to CDTC so we can move that project along starting in April. Just a reminder that the Complete Streets Guidebook has been released. If you have not received a copy of the Complete Streets Design Guide, or your planning department has not, please let us know. If you have a Complete Streets Advisory Committee and would like to provide copies to them, please let us know. We are working on distributing all of these. And it is available electronically on the CDTC website. CDTC is drafting an equity policy. If you've been to planning committee or policy board meetings in the last several months, you have probably heard about CDTC's efforts to really develop a policy. Equity is a major emphasis area in the bill. But CDTC has definitely been on this path, previous to the bill. We had, an equity advisory committee, and we have really emphasized equity and doing the planning process through an equity lens in our public participation plan and other policies. So this is really a continuation of that, and we'll be presenting draft policies to planning committee and policy board for approval. And once we have a final policy, we will be sharing it with the planner forum. Metropolitan Transportation Plan, what we have traditionally referred to as New Visions. We are planning to start that update in this new UPWP. If you feel like we just adopted the last New Visions, I also feel like that way. I'm still recovering from doing this in 2020. And so we are starting the update in this UPWP. This next year will be mostly collecting data, summarizing it, and doing outreach on, what are the regional trends? What is, what do things look like in the region right now? Doing a lot of public outreach, surveys, maybe some stakeholder and focus group discussions. We are not going to continue the New Visions virtual learning series. I thank everyone who has participated, who has presented. It's been, I think, about 3 years, and we put together a lot of webinars, but we need to kind of shift to focus now on doing maybe just more occasional types of virtual interactive sessions with folks. And yeah, so we anticipate that the new Metropolitan Transportation Plan would be adopted in 2025. It will not be called New Visions. Anyone who uses that term will be, you'll be fine. And we are going to completely rebrand it, really start from the bottom up. New Visions has been a name we've used for a long range plan for a really long time. And it's really been kind of an extension and update of those same principles and ideas for quite a while. So, what are the big ideas for the region? What are the big issues? And, what is really our plan for the future of transportation and mobility? And how do things like land use and climate and equity influence all that? So we'll be talking about that, branding, designing. CDTC also will be formally known as, so lots of changes coming, and we hope to make it easy for everyone to understand and keep everyone updated on all the changes happening here. The CDTC CDRPC Technical Assistance Program. I think everyone is familiar with this program, but we are opening it up again starting in April. If you have an idea, we ask you to reach out and email techassist@cdrpc.org, or give us a call so we can talk about your project idea and scope. A reminder that CDTC has been maintaining a web page on the bipartisan infrastructure law. There have been recently some new announcements and updates. There was a notice of funding opportunity released earlier this week for the charging and fueling infrastructure program. So that is for electric vehicle charging. There's a corridor program and there's a community program. The minimum request is $500,000. It's which is a lot. You can do a lot. So I think it's really aimed towards like large scale types of infrastructure projects. The Safe Streets for All, we have a grant, and that program will be reopened in April 2023. The Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation, or PROTECT, is expected to open in the winter, spring 2023. So soon, and that will be for resiliency types of projects. The Reconnecting Communities Program and Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program is expected to open in late spring. And the Carbon Reduction Program, New York State is developing a statewide plan. And then there are formula funds, which CDTC expects to program perhaps sometimes in the spring. Kind of uncertain. We're waiting to get more information, but those should be expected. Not part of the bill, but also, heads up, probably TAP and CMAQ solicitation. Sometime spring, summer, I think we're expecting one. And then if your community is interested in applying for programs in the bill, I just wanted to point out, and we're going to create some new links and maybe some new tools and put them on the CDTC website for our members. This transportation disadvantaged census tract, or historically disadvantaged communities, it's a mapping tool that Federal Highways developed, and that is, for the most part, the default mapping tool you should use, when the evaluation criteria talks about equity, environmental justice. They're most likely talking about this map. Some programs say this map or another map. Some programs refer to a completely different map. We're working on trying to create a table, a matrix, something that really lays out which map applies to which program, because there are different criteria for each one, but each one does have an equity emphasis. So we just wanted to kind of point that out. The planning initiative status, there's a lot here, and I'm not going to go through all of them because there are a lot, but I did want to point out that there are several new ADA transition plans that CDTC is starting. CDTC completed the Smart Mobility Toolbox. The toolbox is on our website. We also have worked with the consultant, created a brochure. If you're unsure of what smart mobility or smart city is, the toolbox is a good summary. There's some case studies from peer metro areas, how Buffalo, Minneapolis, Columbus, and some other smaller metro areas are integrating new and developing technologies into transportation and services, operation and infrastructure. The tools are categorized by different focus areas. So like PED, traffic management, energy, parking, transit, and then connected autonomous and electric vehicles. And then there's a roadmap that kind of lays out how easy or complicated it is to implement these technologies, because we do recognize that a lot of these technologies require a lot of training, maintenance of data and software and hardwares over time, and then also managing everything on the back end in order to improve operations overall. They're costly. They definitely require a lot of coordination, but we want to be able to help and facilitate that coordination if any community is interested in it. So there is a brochure. It tries to sum things up and point to some of the things that smart cities technologies that already exist in our transportation system in our region, like LED lights and transit, the queue jumpers, and some of the transit signal priorities. Also, the bus lane feasibility study is completed, and the Village of Manans has completed its zoning update and adopted that linkage study recently. And then cities of Troy and Rensselaer are wrapping up their linkage studies. So there are a number of upcoming training opportunities, webinars, conferences. I don't know, Mark, if you want to make a plug for your webinar series or these other APA types of events.
Sure. CDRPC is hosting a webinar series generally on Wednesday webinars. I like to leverage alliteration anytime it's possible. All of our sessions will be certified for CM credits for your AICP planners, also eligible for local planning and zoning board member credits. For CM credit planners, it also includes one of the new required CM categories, sustainability and resiliency. So for AICP planners, you now need 4 required courses annually: law, ethics, equity, and sustainability and resiliency. So all of those required courses are reduced to 1 hour in length from the previous 1.5. APA National Conference is in Philadelphia. You see those dates on the sheet there. If you know of any students who are currently APA members, the Upstate chapter is offering a free ride to the conference, or at least free ticket to the show. Given that the national conference is so close this year, the Upstate chapter is hosting a mini conference in Syracuse on September 15th. It would probably be, you come in on a Thursday night, and there might be a reception, and then all day concurrent workshops on the Friday.
Thanks, Mark. There's also a number of workshops, both virtual and then in person, planned for this summer and fall through the Cornell Local Roads program. These might be also things that your DPWs and DGSs might be interested in if you want to share that information with them. And then not on here, but we will include information in the notes, is the New York State Association of MPOs conference is also in Syracuse, May 9th and 10th. So we will provide information for anyone who might be interested in attending that. So now I'd like to, we have, let's see. We don't have a ton of time, but if anyone has any local program updates that they would like to announce, please feel free to do so now. Okay. All right, well, it is a little past 11, so we'll wrap things up. Our meeting schedule for this year, our next meeting is June 15th. We'll have a meeting September 21st and December 21st, same time, 9:30. If you have ideas for, last year we did a site visit to the Focus Lab in Troy. If there are other types of site visit field trips you're interested in taking, please let me know. I'd be happy to organize something. So thank you for attending today, and we will have notes in the meeting recording up on our website fairly soon. Thank you.